500 million reasons to be happy today. That is, of course, if you're a Palantir shareholder. Because according to Digital Health, Palantir is to be named the winner of the £500 million NHS contract from the UK government worth about $580 million. Now, this is a report from Digital Health, so the link to the original report is actually in the description, so you can go ahead and see it for yourself. Now, according to the report, the decision is made. It is Palantir with Accenture, and they beat out Oracle and IBM, and the final announcement is just days away, whatever that means. Now, this contract isn't about replacing the UK IT healthcare systems. No, that's not the point. The point is to do exactly what Palantir Foundry did with the airlines. If you remember, we covered Skywise, a project that started originally with Airbus, and how it absolutely revolutionized the airline industry. Now, this is the same thing, but in healthcare. This is going to be the pilot for a much, much bigger project. I'll talk about it in a second. 500 million is chump change towards the total addressable market of this thing if it actually goes through. Allow me to explain. So the idea here is very simple. Instead of replacing every single bad IT system in the UK, that's not what this project is about. It's about taking all of this data that's been generated by the various IT systems in the United Kingdom, which is now separate in its own silos, and bring it all together in one holistic approach in which it actually talks to each other, and a bunch of decision-making is allowed that will improve healthcare, will improve the time of waiting, will improve the cost, and basically a win-win-win. The government spends less, you get better treatment, you get faster treatment, and people are not bummed out because they're waiting for months and months for things probably they don't need. So a total improvement of the healthcare system in the UK, all by combining all this massive data from all these separate systems across the UK healthcare system into one system that talks to each other. Palantir does not generate any new data. That's not the point. They'll take all this massive, unused, and completely misunderstood data, and they will bring it in one pool, which will allow the organization, the government, the company, whatever that may be, to make better decisions, to save money, to save lives, to increase efficiency. With Skywise, they reduced the time to actually produce an A350 by 33%, which was insane. This time, they will do the same thing with the UK healthcare system. Now, the crazy part about it, they've already done it. According to a pilot they ran with 2 hospitals in the UK through the NHS as a pilot for this, they've reduced the wait time for patients by 30% in those 2 hospitals. That is insane. Wait time reduction, UK, these things not supposed to be in the same sentence. I know why this thing has taken so long, and I'll explain. As somebody who's not from the UK, as a US person, you might be weirded out by this. By saying, well, look, Palantir is such a great company. They work with all the 3-letter agency with the US. They're the most trustworthy company you can rely on to give all this data to. But that's exactly the problem. In Europe, and in the UK included, they look at this as a bad thing. If this is kind of a CIA.co or some sort of a private spy company working for the US government, if we give them our data, it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be used by the US government. All this silly nonsense bahoonie. It took a few months or a little bit longer for the UK government to understand that this argument that was brought up by a bunch of interest-based advocacy groups that have now basically closed their doors and no longer being funded. But this argument was baloney. Palantir does not create data, Palantir does not sell data, and Palantir does not give anyone's data to anyone besides the person whose data that is. That's the whole point of this company. That's why they're getting all these massive contracts from Skywise, from the US government, from a bunch of companies in the United States. It's because Palantir are the best safeguards for information. Now, once this hurdle was passed and the UK government realized, well, Palantir isn't going to sell our data, it's not going to lose our data, it's not going to be hacked. So in fact, they're the best place to put our data and to trust this company. The next stage started. They ran this pilot, and then the pilot, Palantir absolutely killed it. And now we're getting to the important part. Why is it so important to Palantir? Because we're talking about a company that's going to do $2.2 billion in revenue this year. That's less than 5%. It's not such a big deal, is it? Well, you shouldn't look at it from a monetary perspective. Now, obviously, every contract is a win. I'm not going to sit here and say it's not. Every contract they secure is a win. Every revenue is a win. But this one is not about the money. The idea here is that Palantir is very, very strong on the US side. They're very strong on the US governmental side, and they've been for 2 decades. Now they're getting stronger and stronger every quarter on the US commercial side, and you can see it in the latest earnings. They've absolutely been killing it. But the main weakness of Palantir is in Europe. Now, obviously, they're not going to work with China or Russia or with enemies of the US, the axis of evil. So their two total addressable markets are the US and the EU. And little markets accept that as well. But the idea here is that EU is the next place to conquer for Palantir. But they have no relationships. They have no real dominance like they have in the US, and has to start somewhere. Now, they've done it on the commercial side. Skywise with Airbus was a massive success. And the test cases from this are basically paving the way for Palantir to start launching commercially. But what about UK governments? What about EU governments? What about German governments? What about the entire European Union? Nobody wants to be first. They know that this is a great company. They know the US government is happy with it, but somebody has to go first. Somebody has to jump in the pool and see if the water are good. And this contract opens the doors for two things for Palantir. Let me explain. Now, once this contract is deployed and once Palantir delivers on the promise, much like they've done with Airbus and the Skywise system, and results start coming out, more governments are going to say, look, we want to save money. We want to reduce waiting times. We want to improve treatment. Let us use the same system as well. The same thing that happened with the airline industry is going to happen with the healthcare systems around the European Union. Now, the second phase is once the entire European Union is working with Palantir on the healthcare systems and the results are stellar, they can expand to other stuff. Many doors will open to Palantir, but the first one is the hardest. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Nobody wants to be first, but once this door is busted, the floodgates will be open for Palantir. But the question here is, what does it mean for Palantir investors, current, existing, and potential? Should everybody run right now and buy Palantir shares like there's no tomorrow? Now, first of all, I'm going to say this is not financial advice. This is just my opinion. You have to do your own research and make your own decisions. You're all grown-ups and not kids. So don't be doing anything because I said so, okay? Let's put this on the table first. Now, my opinion is very simple, and I've been very consistent about it. Palantir has come a long way in the past 3 years. $2.2 billion revenue a year. This is what they're going to do this time. 4 consecutive quarters of GAAP profitability. S&P 500 inclusion almost imminent. Stock-based compensation went down from 6% of revenue to 1% of revenue within the past 2 years. Closing in on 20% revenue growth year per year, currently at 17%. Great quarter. They've beat results twice in a row already, maybe even more, I can't remember. So they are getting better. But there's still issues they have to address. The net dollar retention has to improve. The revenue growth is still not at 20%, not at 25% where it should be. So Palantir needs to grow faster. It needs to improve its net dollar retention, and it needs to improve the geographies to go outside the scope of the US. These 3 things are still in the making, and we still have to see that they're actually making it. So the idea here isn't to jump on and sell your house and buy Palantir shares tomorrow. Like, don't do it. Just simply don't. But in my opinion, the system to do it is to act slow, steady, and analytical. Let me explain. Now, I've developed a very simple system. It's called a double down DCA system. This DCA system, dollar cost average system, is very simple. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. In fact, I'm going to give it away right now. Now, what we do is we buy Palantir stock all the time. Down or up, we ignore the price whatsoever. Where we are looking at the price is whether the price gets too high, then we just buy normally. But if the price gets too low, we start buying a little bit faster, increase. The idea here, and all of my patrons, patreon.com/Tom Nash is where we teach this. All of my patrons have been doing this, have lowered their cost base in Palantir over the past 3 years. Even though the stock went crazy, $6, $40, $7, $20, all of them are way closer to the bottom than to the top with this system without spending crazy money and gambling. This is the right way to do long-term investing. We teach this on our academy and our Patreon. There's a few spots left. Patreon.com/Tom Nash, and you get access to our unbelievable Discord. We have 2 Zoom meetings per week. We have an Academy Zoom meeting on top of it in which we teach these things. We already have 16 lectures, which are pure gold. I advise you to participate. And if you sign up today, you actually get to participate in lecture number 16, which is today at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you miss it, it will be uploaded to our Discord as recorded. So don't worry about it. Thank you so much. Shout out to the Palantir community. I'll see you in the next video.